what we need to do is 6 simple points that will turn South Africa virtually overnight into a winning nation. If they're just announced, that'll be enough. When they're implemented, it'll be even more. And they are, firstly, to improve our score on the Economic Freedom Index, get us back up from about 120 to 40 or even higher. Places like Mauritius have now risen to 9th on the index. Then the second thing we have to do is have an impact assessment for what every law does to the poor. The impact on poor and small businesses must be assessed. The next one is legislation by repeal, work at removing laws instead of making new ones. The next is review all the financial control policies, exchange control, financial market regulation, banking regulation, credit regulation, and so on. Scrap them or relax them. Next is land, is remove all the barriers to making land development legal and possible and easy. And finally, labour, allow all unemployed people to take whatever job they wish. There are various international studies. The one that we look at most is called Economic Freedom of the World, that ranks countries by economic policies and systems. The ones that have the freer economies are the ones that have the highest rate of growth, or more precisely, to be technical, the ones that move from less towards more free are the ones that have high growth, and the ones that move from more to less free stagnate and decline. South Africa is a case in point. We're no special case. There's nothing special about us. We're just like the rest. Under Mandela, we went from about 120 to about 40th freest economy on earth, and we had growth and jobs and foreign investment and local capital formation. And then during the Mbeki era, there was stagnation because we stopped moving upwards in the index from less to more free economies. And then under Zuma, we went down. We went all the way back down to where we'd started. And in the process, predictably stagnated with the highest level of sustained unemployment in the world. So that's the first thing to do. You just have to get our score up on the Economic Freedom Index. That's not difficult. There are 42 criteria. You just tick them off, tick the boxes, make us get a better score at each one, and then the country will boom. We will go into 6, 7, 8% economic growth rate, and at 7% economic growth rate, wealth doubles every 10 years. If we had managed to do that since 1994, we would now be one of the world's wealthiest countries at something like $50,000 per capita GDP. Instead, we have $6,000. That's the consequence of not booming, not having high growth. The second thing to do is almost every law we inherited from apartheid was a law made for rich white people living in leafy suburbs and running big formal companies, first world companies. Those are still with us. Why the ANC loves apartheid so much, I simply don't know, but it just keeps everything inherited from apartheid going, including all the stupid laws governing, for example, developing housing, getting title deeds to poor people, low-income people, regulating them. So what we need is a poor people's or poor income and policy assessment for all new laws. So an assessment that any new law has to pass has to be what its impact will be on the poor and small businesses. So that's the second thing, is an impact assessment for every new law, and systematically the same assessment applied to all past laws, and repeal or scrap or relax the ones that don't pass the assessment. Again, not very complicated. And then there has to be a whole policy of changing the notion of what the legislature is. We think legislatures must legislate. So they think they have to gather in Cape Town every year and make laws. And they don't even bother to go to Cape Town anymore. They just make the laws in Pretoria. The ministers just issue decrees and regulations and directives, and they make law in their smoke-free rooms in Pretoria. What we need is a year or 2 or 3 or 5 of legislation by repeal. Not new laws, but removing bad laws. They should spend their time saying which laws should be removed. If they really do want to make a new law, then they have to remove at least 2 other laws first. In other words, more removal of bad laws than addition of new, almost always, bad laws. Our financial laws. our foreign exchange laws. No serious country still has foreign exchange. What are we doing with this thing invented in Nazi Germany, introduced by the apartheid regime in the new South Africa a generation after apartheid is supposed to have ended? We still sit with the same old love affair with what they inherited from apartheid. Scrap exchange control and all the other financial control laws, which have just been booming and escalating. We have the so-called Twin Peaks, which just makes it essentially impossible for poor people. It is not possible for them to enter the market. We had the Mbeki Foundation, the former First Lady, Zanele Mbeki, visit us and explain that all they want to do is lend money, and they've got a lot from international sources, to rural women wanting to start businesses and farming and catering and doing knitting and training and whatever else. And the financial control laws make it essentially impossible. The National Credit Law says that to make a microloan it has to be in writing and it has to be lodged with a National Credit Register, and there have to be at least 5 technological ways in which the debtors can get the outstanding balances and so on, all making it absolutely impossible for an emerging or small financial service provider to operate and survive. And then we have, for example, the laws governing land. Again, a love affair with what was inherited from apartheid. To put it very practically, to register a new residential area in South Africa requires compliance with old apartheid town planning and township register and surveying and zoning and licensing and health and safety and building code laws, all of which essentially make it absolutely impossible for practical purposes, to turn a former location, a former township, a tribal village, an informal settlement, into a lawfully ownable, registered piece of land. There are probably about 10 million black South Africans, all of whom have land, but do not own the land, and the land is not properly registered and properly surveyed, and therefore we have an enormous amount of wealth, probably R1 trillion, the equivalent of an entire annual budget, already in the hands of black people, but it's dead capital because they're not allowed to trade it, they're not allowed to do anything with it. And so what we want to do is scrap all those laws, those township register laws. They're a violation of human dignity, they're a violation of the rights of the poor to improve their own housing. Someone living in a tin shack, for example, is forbidden by law from improving their own housing by turning it into a brick structure, permanent structure. They're forbidden by law, for example, to trade and sell electricity from one resident to another. They can't jointly buy a generator, for example. So they're completely victims of the failed electricity policy in South Africa, another apartheid dinosaur they inherited. And then the labor law. We have the highest level of sustained unemployment in the world in South Africa, now at about 10 million people. There are now about as many unemployed as we have employed people in South Africa. And the way to solve that problem is firstly remove all barriers to getting a job. Anyone who's unemployed should be free to take whatever job they wish. It's not complicated. You don't have to tamper with the existing law. You should just say it doesn't apply to the unemployed. It applies to people who have a job. In South Africa, we have a belief that if we have an impressive president who sends emissaries around the world and says, please come to South Africa, people will come. Investors are not stupid. They go in the world to where they are free to move their money in and out without exchange controls. They go in the world to where they're free to make as much profit as they like. And there are 200 countries in the world all competing for their presence and investment. And we are very low on their list. And that's not rocket science. It's not complicated. You don't need national development plans. You don't need committees or inquiries. You have to do research by looking. Look around the world, which countries prosper, and what are they doing? What do you do in order to prosper?